sourdough starters are incredibly delicious and flavorful pre-ferments that help add a tangy flavor and open chewy crumb. However, making these can be quite time-consuming. Luckily, we have developed a quick and effective starter recipe that will be ready to use in only 5 days. What is a sourdough starter? A sourdough starter, also referred to as a levain, is a type of pre-ferment used in bread making. Pre-ferments are used as a unique leavening agent in bread. It also adds flavor and an interesting texture to the crumb of the loaf. Once the pre-ferment is fully developed, usually after about 7 to 12 days depending on the environment, it is used in a sourdough bread recipe. It functions as a leavening and flavoring ingredient. Yeast in sourdough starters. In a starter, it helps give the pre-ferment a head start and that bit of extra fermentation activity. Essentially, it helps you create a cheat starter. You don't have to wait as long for the fermentation process to start and can use it within a day or two. Yeast in sourdough bread recipes. Yeast is also sometimes added in addition to the sourdough starter. This does the same as it would for a starter. It gives the dough an added boost and will make the loaf rise more. Can you add yeast after the dough is mixed? First, if your dough did not rise as much as you wanted, it is never going to make as good bread as you wanted. The additional yeast will also not work as effectively when added in after the dough has been made. The dough is already quite heavy and the yeast won't be able to create a massive lift. Regardless of whether or not you are using dry or fresh yeast, you will need to dissolve and activate it in some lukewarm water. It will be much easier to incorporate into the dough once it has been dissolved in water. To control the consistency of the dough, you can adjust the amount of water you are dissolving the yeast in. But, if you have an extremely stiff dough that needs a lot of hydration, you can dissolve it in much more water. The exact amount of yeast you will need to use is entirely relative. We would say start with 5 grams. But, again, we highly recommend just starting a new dough from scratch. What you will need in making this recipe. Ingredients: 5 grams of active dry yeast, 1 cup lukewarm water, 1 cup bread flour. Step by step. Step 1. In a medium mixing bowl, combine the active dry yeast and the lukewarm water. Do not heat the water too much as it will kill the yeast. Mix the ingredients with a wooden spoon until all of the yeast has dissolved. Step 2. Add bread flour into a large glass mixing bowl. Add the yeasty water mixture to the flour. Combine the ingredients using a wooden spoon. Step 3. Pour your quick sourdough starter into a large glass container that is at least 4 or 5 times bigger than your starter. The starter should have more than enough space to grow. Tips and tricks. First and foremost, this quick sourdough starter recipe with yeast will be ready to use after 5 days. We highly recommend only using clean glass containers. This will ensure your starter doesn't absorb any off colors and flavors from stained plastic bowls. Do not forget to feed your starter. If you cannot do so every day, store it in the fridge so that it grows at a much slower pace. This sourdough starter recipe with yeast also freezes very well. Freezing will essentially inhibit all growth without killing the bacteria. Whichever flour you started the initial ferment with, keep using it to feed your starter. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.